At Rubberband, we empower each other through positivity, kindness, and practical advice. Join a community of thousands of peers who understand the unique challenges you face. Rubberband. Company agnostic, low ego, high empathy, always supportive. Welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Rubberband podcast, where I am joined by extra special guest, Lewis Romano. And Lewis is from ViewJobs, and today's episode is another episode of the Talent Tech series. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work on, the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I would like to extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome, my friend Lewis. How you doing today, mate?
Eden, I am outstanding. Great to be with you today and have a great chat.
I'm really looking forward to it, mate. I had a week off. The Rubberband podcast has been going for over 2 years. And I had my very first week off from recording. So it's great to be back. And I couldn't think of anyone that I would much rather interview for my first episode back. So thank you.
It's a great honour, Eden, to be the next one in the queue after your listeners have probably been desperately screaming out for the latest episode. So thank you for having me fill those big shoes.
Oh, I wish. Well, hopefully, right? Hopefully they were screaming out for more episodes and not going, oh my God, thank God Eden shut up for once. But anyway, look, I'm excited to talk about ViewJobs with you today. I obviously live regionally, so it's something that I'm really strongly connected with, and we've caught up and chatted previously, and think it's wonderful the work that you're doing. But with the Rubberband podcast, it's really great to get to know the individual as well behind the brand. So I'm really excited to hear about your career journey. The best place always to start is I like to go back to childhood and find out about growing up and the kind of young lad Lewis Romano was. Tell me about that. Tell me, where are you from? Tell me about your childhood.
Well, if we want to go right back to the start, I was born in a place outside of Melbourne called Mount Macedon, where I lived until I was 5 years old. But for whatever reason, I've got a really vivid memory of lots of things, including those very early years living on a pretty large property, which was lots of fun, football field, goalposts, all that type of energy. And then my parents moved back to the city where I grew up in inner city Melbourne, which was, that was just life as I knew it. I didn't know anything other than that. I thought my life was normal and the same as everyone else's, and it was probably not until going to university a little bit later that I think you realise that every walk of life is unique.
That's right. And when you were, and that would have been a bit of a culture shock as a young child moving from, a regional area. And I know Mount Macedon quite well. I was in Gisborne just a couple of weeks ago, but moving from there into inner city, how was that adjustment? Did you miss country life, or did you just adapt to inner city?
At that age, the period of missing the previous lifestyle probably took about 3 weeks to get over. But I do recall yearning for some of the things that we were able to enjoy in Mount Macedon, but also moving into a metropolitan environment, I think was definitely the best thing for me, and it exposed me to the people and personalities that ultimately along with my parents, influenced the trajectory that my career would go on to take.
Mm. And when you were, perhaps in your school years or maybe in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to be. Probably my younger years, it was, I'll just become Billy Idol, but that never happened. But what were you thinking? What were you thinking as a child in terms of where your career would take you?
I'm one of few people that I know that actually has lived exactly pretty much to the plan that I had set out for myself. Maybe not to the levels yet that I aspire to, but I always, from the time I can remember, wanted to be an entrepreneur, which is a broad and unique thing to aspire to want to do, especially in the in the middle to late 90s, early 2000s. I was, and the reason that's the job description that I set for myself to aspire to was through the exposure of some of the people in my parents and family networks that I looked up to for probably sort of, superficial and flashy reasons. There were certain people in our lives that had a certain swagger or way about them, or, where they lived and how they lived, that appealed to me. And I sort of asked my parents, well, what is so-and-so, what do they do? And each time they would explain to me as being entrepreneurs. So that was it for me. I wanted to be an entrepreneur myself. And that was right through my sort of teenage and high school years. That was my aspiration, ambition. And then conveniently that exact same period in time it was 2004 when I finished high school, the bachelor degree in entrepreneurship became available at RMIT in Victoria, where I lived, and then also on the Gold Coast at Bond University, where I ultimately studied entrepreneurship, which is a degree in nothing.
I didn't know it existed, but that's a fantastic degree. Like, tell me about it. What does that mean?
Well, look, I've got a great degree in socializing, partying, making new friends, forging new relationships, and coming of age through that experience. And at the same time, inside the lecture theatres and tutor rooms, we learned skills like negotiation. We learned fundamentals of economics, accounting, business planning, and communication was a large part of that. And outside of the formal classroom, my dad is a management and sales consultant, so I learned a lot of skills through both university education and also real life exposure to my dad and his profession.
Fabulous. When you were studying, or even when you were in high school, were you working? Like, what was your very first job?
My very first job was I was a golf nut when I was right through my school years, and my dad's mate was the principal of Drummond Golf, which is a large golf retailer, and I played golf with him, and this fellow was older than my father and someone I looked up to as well, and he got me in. My first job was sort of unboxing golf clubs in the storeroom at Drummond Golf in Southland in Melbourne for those, Cheltenham, for those who know the area. So that was my first job. Mum would drop me. I think I was 13 or I was really young. I think I was under the age where it was legal to work. But anyway, it still did. I recall my first pay slip. It was like on paper, $7 an hour. So I think rates have gone up since then, but that was the first job. And then I actually haven't been employed other than for organisations I've founded since then, which is quite unique part of my journey.
Really? So when you finished university and you studied that degree that we just had a little bit of a chuckle about, but I think it was actually a very meaningful degree considering your career. Tell me, where did you go from there? Like, how did you kick off your professional career?
Yeah, so I was really blessed to have my dad's support to work within his organisation in management sales consulting, essentially in an admin / operations role, which gave me broad exposure to his business and real hands-on experience as well in that corporate environment. Dad worked with really large organizations like Nike and Mercedes-Benz and Emirates Airline and Nintendo and Salmat, which was the largest call center operation in the Southern Hemisphere, I think, at the time, or at least Australia. So I got to see a corporate environment close up. But pretty quickly, it was evident to myself and my dad that I had aspirations to do my own thing. So really, he helped and supported me a lot to be able to pursue my ambitions. And first of all, the first venture I set sail on was a really interesting product. It was an agricultural product called breedersales.com, which the vision was to be the car sales for livestock, to buy and sell sheep, cattle, alpaca, and horses. This was in 2008, and we were just well ahead of our time.
Yeah.
Undercapitalized. We had the right vision and plans in terms of media partnership aspirations and things of that nature. But my partners and I were fresh out of university, big on ideas, stars in our eyes. Thought we would be able to change a 200-year-old industry from the way they did business, and we learned a lot. And I personally took so much out of that, foundation of incorporating a company and all those minor bits and pieces that go along with it, which pushed me towards my next company, which was more successful, but not wildly, was selling tailor-made shirts.
I saw, because and like looking at your background, and this is what I love about your journey. Like it's interesting and creative in terms of the directions that you've gone in. You haven't been so, I suppose, focused on a particular industry or a particular area. I mean, you went from agriculture to fashion.
To tailoring, yeah. Well,
tailoring,
exactly. Well, yeah, fashion. It was. Fashion is a passion of mine, or corporate fashion, I should say. People say that I only know how to wear a suit and a tracksuit, and I am still struggling with the in-between part. Being sort of taller, skinny, and lanky, especially at that age of, I started Romano Napoli shirts. Naples is where the factory was that produced the shirts, so they were of a high quality. They were Italian made to order. Problem was, the more I sold, the more money I lost. I didn't factor in exchange rate fluctuations, shipping costs, returns, refunds, and a whole bunch of other variables, and especially also doing business in another language that isn't my first language, Italian, and working with a factory that let me know in our first year of business that, just so you know, we take August off, so all your orders in July, the customer won't get them until September. So again, the fundamental business lessons were learned, valuable experiences were made, and an incredible collection of shirts were acquired by myself and my friends and family, as well as about 1,000 other people. So I was proud of the volume that we were able to quickly scale to, but economically the business didn't stack up. And that's when Spot Jobs, my first job and employment venture, was hot on the heels of Romano Napoli. I launched a job platform dedicated to casual entry level employment.
So what, and then this is where we're getting into our industry, right? And the Rubberband community. But what was that opportunity? When you Spot Jobs came about, everything comes from an idea or, generally a frustration where you're like, there's a gap in the market here. And, I really want to plug that gap because I think it's important. What led you to that? Like what made you think that this was an opportunity that needed to be, tackled, and why this industry? Why recruitment? Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a good story how it came about. So, my mum's in the PR and event business, and one of her major projects annually was to facilitate the Emirates marquee at the Melbourne Cup. So in those days, that was a huge event. It was a really thriving environment of lots of interesting personalities, and my soon-to-be business partner, not that I knew it, was his girlfriend was Margot Robbie, so she was invited to the Emirates marquee, and he was there, and the only other as a guest, and the only other person he knew and that I sort of knew was each other from school. We'd gone to school together, albeit he was a couple of years behind me. And the genesis to get to the story of Spot Jobs was he said, "Oh, hey, Lewis, I saw that you did breeder sales. That's interesting. I've actually got a concept in the casual job space, because last year when I wanted to save some quick money to go to schoolies, I just thought there'd be a website where I could get a bricklaying assistant job, or I could do something quick and easy, cash in hand. Went online. All there is Seek." I thought, well, interesting. Obviously, even back in 2010, this was Seek had dominant market share, was already $1 billion company. I thought to myself, well, that's going to be a tricky market to disrupt, but disruption is fundamentally, something that is a core pillar of each of my sort of three, material ventures. This being the first one, and having a specific niche within an established industry is something that I thought gave us an opportunity to chisel away at, which we certainly did. Being dedicated to casual, part-time, entry-level, fundamentally non-career roles, jobs where you didn't necessarily need to know what your qualification and what you might beeline towards, but you would know the search filters were quite unique for its time, in that you search for jobs based on your location, your willingness to travel certain distances from there, whether you had a preference to work with customers or not, indoors or outdoors, and a couple of other filters that spat you out a match, which is part of the vernacular of today, 10 plus years later. And we were blessed to have, major organisations quickly jump on board spot jobs, like Coles and Woolworths were early adopters, along with Apple, which was great to have all their store job vacancies on the platform, along with the retail food groups. Red Rooster comes to mind, as well as many other household names. So, yes, spot jobs was conceived really out of my mate wanting to get a bricklaying job and not being able to find a site to get one.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you were together for 6.5 years, I believe. So,
yeah.
What then made you switch to another pretty significant change, moving into Credit Clear from spot jobs? Yeah, what tell me about that.
Well, Credit Clear, financial technology, or known as fintech, was my second sort of significant venture. So my co-founder at Spot Jobs elected to stay on at Spot Jobs and continue the operations there, to ultimately exiting to an industry player. But as that was happening, I was drawn to this opportunity that, again, it sort of come to me, that I was really passionate about, and that was communicating to people about missed payments and arrears in a better way than was the status quo. In 2015-16 was when Credit Clear was conceived, and I knew that rather than calling people about missed phone repayments, car, bank credit cards, electricity, whatever the case may be, it's a bad customer experience. So my vision was to communicate to people through actionable SMS, where you could self-cure, being the industry term, with regard to arrears payments. So if anyone's received an SMS that says click here to pay, there's a high likelihood that's come from the organisation that I founded, that ultimately went on to become a ASX listed company from when we IPO'd in 2020, which was a really incredible experience. Now we're talking 4.5 years ago. We took the company public, and that business has grown consistently since then, and obviously proud of the legacy that's been left in that space.
Well, I'm going to think of you every time that I get a nudge from Energy Australia that I've forgotten to pay my gas bill, right? Like,
yeah, right.
There we go.
Example. That's what we introduced to the market. So, that was another 7-year journey. There's a bit of consistency in those two projects, for me at least. I mean, they still live on, especially at Credit Clear. Were essentially the same period of time.
And then it came calling back, the old recruitment industry, right, Lewis? You can't get rid of us.
Yeah, well, it feels like home, Eden.
Does it? Does it? I know we're a very welcoming industry, right? We do like to wrap our arms around, particularly innovation, right? Like I actually think that, the talent industry is very, very curious at looking at, new ways of doing things and new products that go to market. I don't know. Do you feel the same way? Has that been your experience?
100%. Yeah, it really does feel like home. And I'll be truthful. I never thought in a million years after Spot Jobs and then subsequently Credit Clear that I'd be back in essentially the exact same business model again. But it's with all of the same type of dynamics, with a significant media partnership at Spot Jobs. It was Channel 9. Here at ViewJobs, it's Australian Community Media because we're dedicated to the regional markets. And to your point, the community is so welcoming, so open-minded to new entrants, to disruption, and also it's the Rolodex that I accumulated through the Spot Jobs years. Everyone in the industry 7 more years later has progressed in their careers. They're now seen as decision makers. They remember me, and they're happy to help and facilitate what they're able to, or give us the opportunity to just talk about ViewJobs and how we can add value to their organisation. And it's amazing, really, to see how things have not changed in some ways with regard to some of the technology and how things have evolved quite a lot.
Absolutely. Well, mate, ViewJobs, listeners, is really a brand new, it's been, 18 months, I think, so not really brand new, but we'll say new, employment marketplace dedicated for regional employment. So tell me the concept around this and why was this important to bring to market?
ViewJobs was so important to bring to the market because it is Australia's first and only mainstream dedicated regional jobs platform. And 38% of Australians and growing live in regional Australia, and that's defined as outside of the metro capital cities. So we've got, nudging half of the country living in a market that's undercatered for without a dedicated provider to connect talent with opportunities that desperately need that talent. And the foundations of ViewJobs were laid between myself and founding team with Australian Community Media, which is known as ACM, and they're the publishers of famous publications including the Canberra Times and the Newcastle Herald, Ballarat Courier, where you're at, Eden, along with 60 other regional publications, several of which are 100 plus years old. So we have incredible reach into the regional markets. About 8 million people a month are exposed to ACM publications in one way, shape or form. So what that gives us is incredible reach and importantly trust, credibility and validation of a new entrant, as you mentioned, to the job board landscape, being only a little over 12 months old, as you said, entering the market with full force and wrapping mainstream newspapers from front to back and full page lift outs was a pretty significant way to enter the market and build credibility within regional communities, regional cities. Some of these places are quite large, and what we learned was that our proposition is very desperately needed. That the representatives of some of the traditional players in the space haven't been to these communities and are not focusing on dedicated solutions for regional employers and job seekers.
And does that extend to, because, fundamentally you think, okay, well, it's for people that live in those regions and opportunities that are local to them. But is there a focus on bringing in talent to the regions for people that, let's say, myself living in St Kilda hadn't considered Ballarat, even, is there a component of that as well to actually attract people either into certain regions or back to certain regions?
Yeah, big time, Eden. We are really obsessive about connecting three cohorts of people with regional opportunities. So individuals with skills and talent, experience and ambition in the regional market that the opportunity exists. And a really good example of that is in Tamworth, where one of our clients is an engineering plant that was looking for a boiler maker. The position was vacant for 12 months or just under. When ViewJobs entered the market in March last year, we filled that role within 2 weeks of our launch. Now, what's crazy is that the individual who got the job lived in Tamworth and he was looking for work for a while. So just goes to show there's a disconnect between the existing frameworks before we arrived and connecting talent to local opportunities. So that's a big focus for us. It's ensuring that local talent is getting into local opportunities and that we become the conduit for the individual and the employer. Secondly, we're also obsessed around bringing back a talent that has grown up in a regional city around the country. They've gone and studied and progressed their careers in other parts of the country or the world, and bringing those skills home and going home to where they're from and adding back and contributing to the community that they grew up in. And we see a lot of that, and we see some cross-region migration and movement through the platform, but also through our reach outside of the ACM network, we're able to talk to individuals about going back to the markets that desperately needs some of the skills that they can bring. And then the third cohort that we're obsessed with is bringing metro market individuals. There's probably a better way to define that, but
well, I know what you mean.
People that have the skills to pay the bills in the city and relocating to the regions for an uplift in lifestyle, an uplift in cost of living, benefit, a better lifestyle for the kids, as I said, a bigger backyard, a smaller mortgage, all of those things, whilst bringing desperately needed skills into markets that could really benefit from having them there. So they're the three groups: people in the regions already, keeping them there, bringing people from the regions back, and attracting people from metro markets to enjoy a lifestyle and career uplift in the regions.
Amazing. And I'm all for it. As you know, I'm a regional ambassador myself. I couldn't imagine going back to Metro. I travel a couple of days, a week to work in Metro, and I love that. It's a great environment, and I love having that balance. But, I know so many people that have made this move from Metro to the regions, and for you to be able to shine a light on employment in those regions, and for a lot of people, reducing the burden of having to have lengthy commutes, or particularly when most organisations are working hybrid, I think it's a wonderful service, and definitely something that we needed in the industry and we needed in the market. And I think it's fabulous. So firstly, congratulations. And I can't wait to see it continue growing and thriving. And listeners out there, viewjobs.com.au, is that right, Lewis? Did I get it right?
Us. viewjobs.com.au. You'll find us there. Reach out. We'd be delighted to communicate to anyone about what we do, how we operate. We've got a broad offering, beyond traditional job posting and reach through that. We have a hybrid recruitment offering where we can perform some of the skills of the functions, I should say, of an outsourced recruitment team at a lower rate and fixed fee. And then we have an education division to the business called the ViewJobs Academy, where we upskill and help individuals become more job ready to follow their career ambitions.
Amazing. Well, my final question for you, Lewis, and this has been wonderful. We have a lot of innovation coming out of Australia when it comes to talent tech, and we've got a lot of individuals that are on that journey that you started, a while ago. You're onto your kind of third big venture, and your second venture within our industry. What advice would you give those individuals that have an idea that they want to, whether it's HR tech or whether it's, outside of that they really want to bring to market? What have been the biggest lessons you've learned, and what advice would you give those individuals?
Well, I think, going by my mistakes, the most important thing that I would do in any industry, especially industries like ours that I'm now back a part of, is understand and respect your industry. As much as you might have a great idea, one that may be through the lens of disruption. In order to disrupt, you must understand. And I think that in the spot jobs days, walking into executive meetings and not understanding what an ATS was kind of put conversations back 12 months with that opportunity. Yeah. Same in the in the fintech world, without understanding the nuances of the collections industry, we probably put ourselves on the back foot for the first couple of years. So I'd say know your space that you're playing, and that might be more relevant to me than most other people because I've come into industries with ideas as a consumer to try and help the consumer experience rather than starting a business in an industry from the industry side and wanting to solve problems in that way. So that's one point. And then more important than all of that, because anyone can you can navigate through anything with enough determination. I mean, failure only happens when you give up, right, or die trying. More important than that is whatever you do it with the right people, because leopards don't change their spots, and it's so important to know who you're in business with, who you're in partnership with, and that you can count on them, and that you're all going to row the boat as fast as you can, and not be exposed to anything that you don't want to be. So choose your friends carefully in business, and know who you're doing business with in what industry.
I couldn't agree more. Lewis, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your journey with the community. And I'm sure there are a lot of people inspired and a lot of people that will be logging onto your website. So watch this space, and thank you, and enjoy your long weekend.
Thanks, Eden. Great to chat.
Great to chat. Thanks, mate.